There's a guitar in the corner of your room that you haven't touched in 8 months, a half-coded website on your laptop, 3 journals with 20 blank pages each, and right now, you're thinking about learning something completely new. People have a word for this: unfocused, scattered, can't commit. You've heard jack of all trades, master of none. So many times it became the voice in your head every time you open a new browser tab, instead of finishing what's already open. This video isn't going to tell you that your chaos is a superpower. That's the comfortable version. The real version is harder and more honest. There is a reason you can't stay, and it's not about focus, it's about what finishing would force you to find out. Psychologists call it novelty seeking. In 1987, Robert Cloninger identified it as a core temperament dimension, a personality trait wired directly into how your dopamine system responds to new stimuli. High novelty seeking means your brain fires hard at the start of something new. The first lesson, the first breakthrough, the first moment you feel like you're finally getting it. That's not enthusiasm, that's neurochemistry. And the same configuration that makes you brilliant at beginning makes you terrible at staying. And then the middle arrives. The middle is where interest becomes work, where progress slows and nobody is impressed yet, where you've passed the beginner's glow but haven't arrived anywhere worth showing. The dopamine to effort ratio collapses. A brain wired for novelty seeking registers that as something close to an alarm, not "this is hard," but "this isn't working anymore," which is almost always the exact moment a new interest appears. And here's what makes it genuinely complicated. Generalists do have real advantages. David Epstein documented them in Range. The ability to connect ideas across fields, to see patterns that specialists miss. But far transfer, the actual cognitive benefit, requires depth, not vocabulary. Knowing the name of 20 instruments is not the same as knowing how to play one. The person who spent 6 months on piano and 3 years on guitar transfers something real between them. The person who watched 4 YouTube videos on both has a playlist. Picture this. Friday night, YouTube open. Best beginner pottery courses. In 2 hours, you know types of clay, best wheels, the difference between terracotta and stoneware. You feel alive. By Monday, you're talking about it like you've been doing it for years. By Wednesday, you're already researching something else. The pottery goes into the graveyard, next to the guitar, next to the code, next to everything that made you feel alive for 48 hours. If what you've heard so far already feels uncomfortably familiar, subscribe to Quiet Psychology, because what comes next is the part nobody puts in a motivational video. Here's what the graveyard is actually costing you. Bloomer Zygarnik discovered in 1927 that the human brain fixates on unfinished tasks. Incomplete loops stay active. They keep demanding attention even when you're not consciously thinking about them. That guitar in the corner isn't just a guitar. It's an open file running in the background. The half-coded site is a process that never terminated. The sensation of being scattered, overwhelmed, perpetually behind, that's not coming from everything you're doing. It's coming from everything you never finished. But here's where it gets harder to hear. Stephen Berglas and Edward Jones identified a mechanism in 1978 called self-handicapping, the behavior of arranging conditions to protect self-esteem before any real test of competence. Never finishing is one of the cleanest forms of it, because if you never finish, you're never fully judged. The potential stays intact. I could have been a musician, I just never had the time. The conditional tense is armor. As long as it's I could, the verdict never arrives. The graveyard isn't a museum of curiosity, it's a collection of preserved potentials, which is a completely different thing. The most dangerous moment in any pursuit isn't the beginning, it's the middle. When you're mediocre, progress is invisible, and no one is watching. That is precisely when the new interest appears. Not by accident. The new interest is an exit route that feels like a discovery. Curiosity and avoidance feel identical at the start. Both pull you towards something new. Both feel like excitement, like possibility, like this time might be different. The difference only becomes visible at the moment where staying would require you to be bad at something in front of someone who might notice. Curiosity stays through that. Avoidance starts Googling best beginner courses in pottery. How many of those interests were things you were genuinely drawn to, and how many were escape routes, taken at exactly the moment the last thing got difficult enough to test whether you were actually good at it? Some of that graveyard is real curiosity, but some of it is a collection of exits, each one taken at precisely the moment where staying would have meant finding out. Is your next new interest something you're running toward, or something you're running from? That question isn't an accusation, it's a map, and a map is only useful if you're willing to look at where you actually are. The novelty-seeking configuration is real, and it is genuinely valuable. The question isn't how to suppress the curiosity. The question is how to tell the difference between an interest that's pulling you and one that's rescuing you, because they feel identical on the way in, and they only separate at the moment you'd have to stay through discomfort. One practice, when the new thing appears, and it will appear, don't ask, is this interesting? Everything is interesting at the beginning. Ask instead, what is happening right now in the thing I'm leaving? If you're leaving because you've genuinely absorbed what you came for, that's a real transition. If you're leaving because staying just got uncomfortable enough to test whether you're actually any good, that's something else. Notice what your mind offers as an alternative at the exact moment the current thing asks something real of you. The new interest doesn't arrive randomly, it arrives on schedule. Serial depth is real. The life lived in seasons, moving through disciplines, carrying something genuine from each. That's a legitimate way to exist. But each season requires actual depth. The genuine polymath doesn't skim sequentially. They go deep, let the chapter close on its own terms, and then move. Not because something new was calling louder, because the current thing had given them what it had to give. So the question isn't, how do I choose one thing forever? The question is simpler and much harder. Finish one. Anyone. Not forever, just completely. Because the first thing you finish teaches you something that nothing you start ever can. That the verdict isn't the end of the world. That the middle was survivable. That you are capable of being someone who stayed. If your mind is already designing the rebuttal, but I really am curious about these things, I believe you. Some of those interests are real, but you know which ones were genuine and which were exits. You just haven't said it out loud yet, because the moment you do, the graveyard stops being a story about curiosity and starts being a story about fear. And if you love someone who starts everything and finishes nothing, they're not lazy, they're protecting something. Every new beginning is a place where they haven't failed yet. Don't tell them to focus. Ask, what happened right before you stopped the last thing? You've been collecting seeds your whole life. Every garden you passed through, every field you briefly stood in, you took a seed. Thousands of potential forests, all in your pockets. But you've never stayed in one place long enough to plant. Not because the soil was bad, because planting means committing to one climate, one ecosystem, and watching some seeds not grow. The collection is safer than the garden, but a seed in a pocket is just a souvenir. It becomes a forest only when it goes into the ground. And ground means staying, means weather, means watching something grow slowly, while everything in you wants to keep moving, keep collecting, keep adding to the weight in your pockets. Pick one seed, the one that's been in there the longest, the one you keep touching when you think nobody's watching. Plant that one. Stay through the rain, stay through the boring middle, where nothing seems to be happening. Because roots don't form in the first week. They form in the months when you were convinced nothing was growing. You were never meant to collect forever. You were meant to plant. If you have a graveyard, Guitars, journals, half-finished code, abandoned courses. Describe it in the comments. Not to confess, to map it. Because every person reading those comments has their own version of that same room. And the one thing nobody ever tells you about your collection of unfinished things, it means you tried. The question is whether you'll let one of them become finished.